Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us this afternoon. My name is Susan Ward, and I'm with the Bureau of Student Wellness at the New Hampshire Department of Education. And I'm here with some New Hampshire school wellness staff, and we will be discussing closing ceremonies. So before we get started, I'm just going to do a quick introduction with everyone. And I'm going to go ahead and mute that real quickly. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. All right. If you want to just tell us a little bit about yourselves and your title and where you're currently working.
I'll go first. So my name is Erin Mitchell, and I'm the Director of Student Wellness for the Hudson School District, SAU 81. I've been in this position since late December and have really enjoyed, I've been with the district for 4 or 5 years now, but in this new role, I've really enjoyed getting to know multiple buildings and multiple level of students, and I'm excited to be sharing what our district is doing to kind of wrap up the school year this year.
Hi, my name is Jessica Caron. I'm the Director of Student Behavioral Health for the Raymond School District, SAU 33. Thanks for having me today. I have a really interesting perspective. I started 2 weeks before we went remote. So March 2nd was my first day, and 2 weeks later we went remote. It has been really awe-inspiring to watch our school district stand up our virtual school and really work hard to engage every student and support them the best way we can.
Absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's definitely been an interesting couple of months, and now it's coming to a close, which is, it feels like it flew by, and at the same time, it feels like it's been a very long time. So in thinking of closure and what that means to families and students and teachers, what are some of the ways that your district's hoping to either provide students and families closure or to the school year, or what have they already done? And if so, have students participated or will they participate in that process?
Yeah, I can answer this one. So I think in terms of a district, we've been trying to start pretty high level and think about first and foremost those really sort of the biggest transitions for our students. So really thinking about our high school seniors, our 8th graders, and our students in elementary school transitioning. And so in terms of the high school, our school worked very hard to survey families and students to really hear what they wanted. They were provided some options in terms of having a virtual ceremony during the typical time of year that we would do that, having some sort of hybrid model, or postponing it. And so at this point, their decision was that the majority of students and families wished to postpone the ceremony later in the summer, where we may have some more flexibility. This is a community that really prides itself by tradition and has really been trying hard to find the ways that they can do that in the most meaningful way. I think in terms of our middle school, one of the traditions that they carry on year to year is a bubble sort of send off for its students. So when 8th graders are leaving, they're sort of sent off with a massive bubbles. And so they are actually working with the town to be able to replicate that in just a little bit different of a way. And so what they're trying to line up is for our families to kind of go through a parade line where the teachers are sort of appropriately socially distanced, but still sort of, putting those bubbles out for them, and obviously following all CDC guidelines. And then for the elementary school, again, based on some family feedback, probably not so much the students, where it was possible, they're going to be doing just sort of a parade send-off where families will be given the opportunity to drive by the school and see their teachers. And that is going to support them in holding true to their tradition around a clap-off, so all their teachers sort of clap for them on their last day. So those are sort of the high level details. They're still grappling with some other sort of tradition pieces, such as usually the seniors walk through the elementary school building and say goodbye to those students as well. So they're still planning out those pieces, but that is sort of where Raymond is at a high level.
For Hudson, much like Jessica mentioned, I think it was, you know, a unanimous vote to survey our parents and families at each level. And through those surveys, we were able to sort of come together, build a task force around some of the closing traditions that we would like to still either postpone or adjust somehow, so that our students and families could still participate in a meaningful way. One of those at the high school level is just being really intentional about what day is the last day for seniors, and any seniors that have completed their course requirements and their competencies. Their last day is going to be May 22nd. And the reason for that, again, focusing on that intentionality, is it was also going to be their prom day. So there was already an emotional tie to that day. And the feedback was, why don't we make it, if we're going to postpone something like prom or adjust, you know, what that day is now going to look like, let's do it in a way that, you know, we can still have that day mean something to our seniors. In terms of our middle school, one of the examples that we are still working out the kinks for is our step up day, which is something we do every year for our incoming sixth graders. We usually have our fifth graders come up and they get to tour our middle school and see the classrooms they might be attending, or their unified arts classes they might be going to. And we're going to try to do that in a virtual setting, partnering with like our local Hudson closed circuit television company that can help us film this and make it look very professional, and get it out to our incoming sixth grade families, and also to any new students that we have coming to the district. It would be kind of challenging if you were, you know, leaving your school district as a seventh grader and coming to ours as an eighth grader and not knowing where you're going. So we want to be able to offer that to new students as well. And then at the elementary level, one of my favorite traditions is field day, and how important that is to the students and their families, and doing a virtual field day next week. The students had a lot of input about what they wanted to see. Of course, we want to do it in a way that parents don't have to go out and buy anything. We're going to use supplies that would be normally found at a home. And I think the rivalry between students and staff and principals and parents is going to all kind of bubble up to make this wonderful experience for our students, and provide a great ending to the school year.
That's definitely going to be interesting to watch. I can almost picture what that would entail. I just wanted to
actually, can I just add that they actually did their field week this week,
cool.
And it was such a great chuckle to watch two of our nurses put out a YouTube video on how to do the potato sack at home and how to record
That's
yourself.
Awesome.
So it was really, really neat to see. Yeah, I think that
So
was such creativity by the elementary school staff to roll something like that out is really great. I'm glad your school's doing it too.
That's great. And Barb, I'm going to let you unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
I'm Barbara Slayton. I'm the coordinator of school wellness for the Franklin School District. So we have counselors in all of our buildings. In addition to the school counselors, we have intervention counselors who can help with mental health issues. And I kind of oversee that wellness program for the students and the staff.
Excellent. And as you joined us, we were basically just talking about different ways our districts are providing students and families closure for the school year, and if students have participated or will participate in that process, and if so, how?
To begin with, we've tried to include student voice by surveying students about what they want, whether it's, you know, would you prefer to have an in-person graduation 6 months from now if it needed to be, or would you rather do something virtual now? it's really hard to make those decisions because we don't know. We don't want to promise them, hey, would you like to have an in-person graduation in August? Well, we don't know what's going to happen in August.
Absolutely.
So we've included students and parents especially in what's important, because we want to get behind what is the purpose of the ritual. You know, when we say graduation, what part of that is it that it's, you know, what's the most meaningful part of that? So we're trying to develop things that work for parents and for kids and for teachers, because in reality, you know, some of these kids have known these teachers for years and years, and they're not going to have the usual way and the usual ritual of saying goodbye, especially if they're graduating or moving from one building to another.
That's so true. And I love that you all touched on the fact that you checked in with the students first and really just said, what are you guys looking for? What's important to you? And I think that you're going to get a lot of great information and really hit on the important stuff when you start looking at student voice for that. So, and I know,
sorry.
Oh, go
I was
ahead.
going to say it's a struggle because we really want people to have input, but we also don't want to create more anxiety by doing that. So we're trying to find out what's important and then do what we can within the parameters that we have right now.
Exactly. And I know we started out focusing on closure for students and families. And the reality is there needs to be closure for teachers and educators as well, and the school staff. And what is that looking like in your district? And has your district started talking about ways that they're going to provide that closure to educators?
You know, what I can share in terms of our district is that teachers have been part of the planning in terms of closure for students and really thinking about sort of like what their needs are and how they're really going to process saying goodbye to these students in a way that is very untraditional. I think that what felt nice for the district is that they came out with a very like sort of methodical way for teachers to come in and pack up their rooms, giving them enough time and also giving them some sort of privacy to do that as well. And that coincided nicely with Staff Appreciation Week. So while teachers were doing that, they were also getting some really nice messages in the mail from various committees within their buildings. So I think it is an ongoing discussion for us, something that we're continuing to discuss in team leader meetings and in faculty meetings as well.
I've noticed since I've started working in education, most of my career was in mental health. And since I've started working in education, educators are probably the last people to think about themselves. So they're so focused on their students. So I think that I spend a lot of time reminding staff to take care of themselves. But as Jess was just saying, it's those things that the teachers are doing, quote, for their students that turned out to be most useful for the teachers as well. A couple weeks ago in Franklin, we had a parade so that the teachers each followed. In Franklin, the school buses are delivering meals to bus stops. We have 5 school buses that are doing that. So they had a small parade following each bus. The parade, you know, people are coming out of their houses with signs and yelling and screaming for their teachers and waving. And that actually must have been last week because it was Teacher Appreciation Week when that happened. So the teachers were doing it, quote, for the kids, but we all knew that they were probably going to get more of a boost from seeing their kids, or at least as much of a boost. So it's really hard to get teachers to talk about what they need. So sometimes it's easier to talk about, you know, what does the school community need? And that includes the teachers as well.
Absolutely. And we're seeing the same exact things in Hudson. You know, one of the things that Barb mentioned is the parades. One of our schools, one of our elementary schools has done it every week. And for that kind of organization and commitment, it does put a lot on the task force that's doing it. But what it does is, like Barb said, is while it seems like it's for the students and the families, it's the number of teachers that have grown to become a part of the parade route really shows that they're enjoying it as well. So the first parade, you know, towards the beginning of remote learning, may have had 10 cars, 12 cars, and now you have almost 90 cars in the parade now that they've gotten in the swing of things, and the parade route is happening more frequently. It's because it is something that the educators want to be a part of, and they do feel like it's a boost for them. And then one of the other ways, I know a couple of other ways that I know that teachers have really sort of got a pat on the back is delivering yard signs. It seems so simple to go and put a sign in the yard of a eighth grader who's going to be promoted to ninth grade, but at the same time, you just spent 3 years with that eighth grader. Or, you know, if you had the student in your ELA class, you might have known that that student struggled, and now that you get to see them in a different way, you still get to see them before they go off to high school. And putting out those yard signs, I think getting the waves from the families and the cheers as the signs were delivered seemingly made the teachers and the staff, you know, feel just as good as the recipient of the yard sign.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I think our elementary school also did some similar things in terms of birthday parades, and I think that's grown as well. I think the other thing that that school did was they had students send pictures of appreciation to their students, to their teachers, and they created a video to share with those teachers. And so I think that that was a really nice way to sort of acknowledge it. And again, to that point where teachers aren't really great at acknowledging what it is that they want in terms of closure, but I think that was a really nice sort of thing for them to see as well.
Teachers in Franklin at the different building levels have also created videos for their students. So again, that's something that they're doing for the students, but I really think it is for the students, and it's also for the teachers. It's a way for them to come together and sort of create something positive, which they can then share with the students. So the teachers are doing an excellent job of role modeling that for the students.
It's excellent. I'm sure with all of this planning and looking at how the school year is going to end, what have been some challenges that your district have been working to overcome to provide some of these plans for closure?
I had mentioned before, we want to include parent and family and community input, yet at the same time, the school district really needs to make some really tough decisions about what's safe. You know, it would be great to have a socially distant high school graduation where kids are all 6 feet apart on a field and they can see each other and all of that. The reality is you're not going to tell a bunch of 12th graders, never mind a bunch of 8th graders, that, you know, after you throw your cap in the air, you can't hug your best friend. That's just going to happen. And then the school has a responsibility to keep everybody safe. So how do we do both of those things at the same time? So I feel it's difficult because oftentimes we're coming up with a compromise, which leaves nobody thrilled about the compromise. We're doing the best we can with what we have to work with. So I think that's a real challenge because especially educators and you know, school district leadership really wants these kids to have the best send off they can possibly have. I mean, whether it's graduation or just ending 7th grade or whatever their milestone is. Nobody likes the situation, so we're having to compromise, and that's a big struggle.
I think for Hudson, just the frustrations have been, you know, mounting, probably just as any school district can attest to. You know, there's many questions still unanswered about when do report cards go out, what do they look like, when, you know, we kind of nailed down when our last day is, so that's good. You know, our SAU is working to answer those questions and update staff, parents, students with the information that they're seeking, you know, as fast as they can, as humanly possible. Our superintendent provides like a weekly update to staff so that we're all in the know about some of these things when the senior cabinet staff has met and has decided on something. So that's been nice to kind of have that trickle down. And you know, I'll quote him in saying that, you know, the book on planning a pandemic for dummies hasn't been published yet, and but what he did in the last update was saying, sort of patting the teachers on the back and saying, if we were to write a book about, how to do this pandemic and how to work hard and, how to keep your spirits high and limit the frustrations, he said it would be our staff. It would be, we would be the ones saying that, this is how to be successful during these hard times. And just like you said, Barb, keeping that morale high and just trying to get everybody to focus on the fact that, we have great staff trying to do the best that they can, and just, have a I lost my train of thought, but just have a mix of, we hear you, we're working on these things, and just tell people we're still deciding, and level set with them, and not try to run away from the hard issues or the challenges. Just talk about, we're talking about those very same things, and we'll get you an answer as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think much of what my school district is grappling with is really similar to Barb and Erin. I think the ongoing ambiguity of everything just weighs on everybody, especially those who are in those leadership positions, because they're really accustomed to being able to make plans and execute them and roll them out. And so I think that is just a huge theme. It's sort of that hurry up and wait, but while you're waiting, make plan A, B, and C. And so I think that leaves people working triple time, right, to make all those things and come up with enough plans of each of those so that you can execute them. I think that, while I'm so glad and proud that the student and family voice was included every step of the way, I think what's tough for administrators is that even if you had 80% of families agree to something, you have 20% who don't agree. And so how do you mess with traditions in a time like that, I think weighs heavily on people. And then there's sort of like the logistical and political parts of things. There's sort of CDC guidelines, then there's sort of what we're allowed to do with the state, and then there's what's comfortable with our towns and with our school and their culture. So I think trying to really balance all of those things, making sure that you're creative where you can get creative, but respectful, and really sticking to strong boundaries is a 24/7 sort of like 360 look around at all times to really figure that out. And just to make sure that we're also being as safe as we can. Even things like the parade for the elementary school requires a lot of coordination with the police department, right? Like, what can we do? How can we do it? And then how do we communicate to everybody, including the community at large, what that might look like? So I think it's multifaceted.
Definitely is. So we've talked about some of these challenges, and there definitely has been creative ways that we've learned to deal with the remote learning. It's definitely had its challenges as well. And as we kind of close upon this school year, you're right, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what next year is going to look like. But in looking ahead, are there things that you're excited or hopeful about when you're thinking about the next school year?
I'm definitely ready to see our students in whatever form or capacity that might be. In terms of my position, one thing that I'm really excited about is furthering the ways that we can provide professional development for our staff around, not just around any trauma from COVID or this remote learning segment, but just really anything that will kind of boost their skills and add tools to their toolkit that they saw that over the course of the 2019-2020 school year that they need help with. They're constantly reaching out and asking for different ways to add these tools to their toolkit. So I'm really excited about being able to provide those through our Project Aware grant monies and get them a chance to say, we heard you loud and clear, and here's the follow through. And then on the back end of that, sort of working on any compassion fatigue or any, we know that students and staff are going to be coming into our buildings if they do open up with, lots of questions, lots of challenges from what they experienced. And we just want to be ready. So having staff trained up on how to hear the signs of that and be able to address it when they pick up on it. So professional development is something that I'm definitely looking forward to facilitating, as well as bringing in experts that can really shine and have our staff in our district feel ready to go.
I'm hopeful that we can take some of the positives out of this, and there have been some. In Franklin, the Franklin Middle School principal is doing a sort of social get together every morning by Zoom. It's not mandatory, it's optional, but it's for any staff who works in the building, paras, teachers, whoever. And there's typically between 20 and 40 people on that Zoom meeting. And it's a chance for people to get to know each other and connect that might not have ever had a conversation before. So I pop in every once in a while, but I'm witnessing relationships forming or strengthening, which happens oftentimes in a time of crisis. You know, there's some bonding that happens over a shared crisis situation or shared trauma. But they're making something positive out of it. So I really think that the fabric of that school and the staff is growing stronger through this because of things like that. For some kids, some of the students are thriving in this environment. So we focus a lot on those students who are struggling. But for some kids, and I'm guessing there's some families out there too who are really enjoying this time with their kids. And there's also some families who are very stressed, and I get that. I'm one of them. But we need to look at what's coming out of it that's a positive. And are there ways that kids can learn? Maybe some kids who have thrived in this environment, are there things from this remote learning experience that we can bring forward with us into the future that might be more helpful?
Yeah, I agree. I think what's exciting to think about is even like the future of snow days, right? Like we were a school that was never okay with blizzard bags, and what does that mean now? And we don't know what it means yet, but just the fact that we can now have that conversation in
One day.
It's just really exciting. Right?
Yeah.
I think even thinking about, you know, the ways that we've used Google Classrooms and what that might look like now for teacher absences and substitutes and how we can really carry forward curriculum when we're not so stressed is really, you know, exciting to think about. I think we all know what can be an email now, right? We've all kind of been pushed to that point to really leverage that technology. I think that there are teachers who may have shied away from using, you know, Promethean boards and Google Classrooms, who will not now. They really may see how this may make their work more efficient. I think that what I have seen through this too, again, only having known the school system 2 weeks before going remote, this remote status really kind of opened the eyes of all schools around the fact that we have a lot of diversity in home life, and that diversity can be very impactful to a student's ability to access that curriculum. And so we have teachers that, you know, seeing a student in a brick and mortar setting, you see one thing, but when you see their background and how many other siblings or adults are living in that home, or what their school space looks like, because the only space is their bed, I think has our teachers thinking a little differently. And I think that it's caused them to really be a little bit more focused on their social and emotional well-being and really thinking about those social determinants of health. Well, I think that's stressful to teachers. I think that, Erin, to your point, like it allows an opportunity for PD to really think about how they can institute more of how they can be a part of those protective factors for our students, and to really feel good about that yes, this is going on, but being that healthy, warm adult is so meaningful and so protective in so many ways. And so I think that our teachers are really kind of primed for that at this point in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise. And they want to know how to help. You know, they want to know how to support our students who are reportedly feeling isolated. And they know that it's not as simple as go walk down the hall and see the guidance counselor, right? That takes a few more steps now. And I think that the last thing I'll say is just, again, learning where to get creative with students. So for those students who really were struggling, I've seen a lot of creativity in terms of breaking down assignments, and again, just really understanding where certain students are at. So I look at as a lot of a lot of positives here, right? And I think that while it's a huge stress for teachers to do all this, I see them as more connected and more apt to support each other. I see a lot of group emails, you know, funny videos going around or things like that, just to kind of support, you know, building as a whole.
I think you're right. You all touched on so many great topics that we could literally just talk about for hours. We won't, but I could. One of the things I loved is, you know, also looking at, you're right, remote learning is stressful and as difficult as it can be for some people. I think this process has allowed us to maybe reflect, or will allow us also to reflect after we've stepped back and say, you know, what was working, what wasn't working, and how can we maybe modify some of the ways we've been doing things all along? And why did it work for this group of students? Yet this group of students, it was just really too difficult. So I think it's really going to open up some conversations and some discussions about how we go into the next school year. So it should be really, really interesting. And I also like the fact that, you know, you mentioned inequities. So, you know, looking at different home life situations, looking at students who are experiencing stress or trauma, or looking at people who don't even have internet or workspace, or maybe there are 4 siblings and a parent that works from home sharing one computer, and how do they incorporate remote learning in doing that kind of thing? So I think it's definitely opened our eyes to things that maybe we weren't paying attention to before.
Susan, I agree with that on so many levels, and what Jess was saying before. It really brought about a lot of conversations with teachers, but also community members as well. I mean, when we start having a public conversation about how are we going to feed these students, you know, the answer should be that everybody has the ability to have enough food at home, that we shouldn't have to ask that question, that the schools, it should not be the school's responsibility to feed kids. It is, you know, in Franklin, we have a free and reduced lunch rate of around 60%. So when you talk about 60% of kids maybe getting their best meal or their only meal during lunch, and then we look at, you know, what happens when they're not coming to school. That's why we've had the school buses deliver the lunches, because the ripple effect is, okay, well, we have the lunch, come get it. How do you come get it if you don't have a car? How do you, you know, so all of those things that families rely on the school for, and the school provides a safety net, really is a social safety net for mental health, for safety, for food, for basic needs like that. It really shines a spotlight when you take that big piece of the puzzle out and then expect, you know, here, community, you support this family, and the community says, well, wait a minute, you know, we don't have a way to get them fed, or we don't, you know, how do we do this? So it's just, it's very sad in a lot of ways, but it's an opportunity to shine that spotlight and say, maybe there's a bigger problem here than what, you know, whether or not we're getting back to school in September or January. That obviously that's an issue, and that's what educators are most worried about. But we're not going to be teaching any of them, and they're not going to be learning anything if they don't have their basic needs met. And I think a lot of people are becoming more aware of that. I think you've already done the Maslow thing, so.
Yeah, I was just going to say definitely Maslow, hierarchy of needs. Absolutely. Is there anything else that you would like to add or touch upon that we haven't discussed as far as like looking at closure and looking at how the school year is going to end?
I think the only thing I'll add, which could be another whole topic on its own as well, is just all the work that our teachers have to go through to figure out where they're ending the year, and then what they need to communicate to the next grade about where they're leaving off. At a high level is something that they're really working diligently on. And then thinking about those students who did sort of, you know, struggle, and how to help them remediate during this time in the last few weeks. Again, that's a whole nother huge discussion, and it's something that happens every year, but it's a little bit more intense this year.
I agree.
The last thing that, you know, I wanted to say, as everybody was sort of sharing their you know, their highlights, about, what their district is doing. One thing that I'm super proud of our district and keeping that positive voice is just, at the end of every email or at the end of every Zoom call, we sort of remind each other that we're in this together. And partnerships like with your office, Susan, the Department of Education, the Office of Student Wellness, as a state, regionally, locally, like we're all in this together. And I feel like, we couldn't have done this as a state for our students and families if we didn't have, so many great resources to rely on and great partnerships in the community and abroad. So just kind of reminding everyone that we made it. We're almost there. We see the light at the end of the tunnel. Keep a positive mindset, and still kind of, end that with we're in this together as best you can.
Those are great parting words. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for your time today, ladies. I really appreciate you taking the time to discuss this really important topic about families, students, and how you as educators are going through that closure process. I also want to thank everyone at home for joining us today. And although we are ending the recording, you definitely can go ahead and ask questions after in the comment section. You can send comments to the Bureau of Student Wellness, and we can make sure we get those answered for you. And you can join us tomorrow back on YouTube at 3 o'clock, and then on Facebook every morning at 9 we do a live coffee chat. So please make sure you join us again when we're discussing all kinds of interesting topics for students, teachers, and families. So we will see you soon.